It's totally fine. I have a lot more stories.
That you do.
Yeah.
That you do.
Guilty as charged with the stories.
Hey gang, welcome once again to I've Got Something to Say with Chris Whiting. I am Chris Whiting, and this week's edition is titled, Chris and Jill Went Up a Hill. So I got a call from a good friend of mine regarding a podcast episode from a couple of weeks ago. And he called to give me his thoughts and feedback on it. Good, legitimate stuff. And in the middle of the call, he handed the phone over to his young son who had just finished with church camp and wanted to tell me his impressions about church camp. So it was very interesting, and I really appreciated his son's thoughts. And essentially, his son said this, that throughout the week, they kept looking at this same diagram, and it was like two cliffs with a chasm in between, and on one side was man, and on the other side was God. And they said on the man side, it was like, you know, evil and selfish and self-centered, and on the God side it was pure good, blah blah blah. And then in between the chasm was this bridging the two, and that was Jesus. And he's like, and I'm all on board with that, like that's good stuff, I get it. He goes, but I have a problem with this, like, wholesale man is just terrible and God's good, and we're just worthless in God's sight. He goes, and then they told us that the best thing you can do, the best people throughout Christendom are the people that sold everything and dedicated their whole lives to serving and worshiping God. He goes, so here's my thinking, Chris. If God wants us to get rid of everything we have and do nothing but worship him, doesn't that make God the selfish one? And I was like, mind blown. Wow. Had no idea how to answer the kid other than to say, I'll tell you what, I love that you're looking at this from a critical mind, and you're not just taking things, you know, wholesale, but questioning. And you should do that throughout your life when it comes to God stuff or any kind of stuff. But it set me thinking about the nature of being selfish. And I was thinking about times when I've been selfish throughout my life. And there are times when I was aware that I was being selfish. When I went through my divorce, I entered this new chapter of life, and all of a sudden I only had my kids half the time. So the half the time I didn't have the kids was Chris time. And man, I was all about me, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to have fun, and I'm painting the town red, and woohoo, look at me. And I was fully aware that I was being completely self-involved and self-indulgent and selfish at the time. But I didn't care. And I feel like I've passed through that season in my life and, you know, come out okay. Still a work in progress, everybody, but moving along. But then I was thinking, well, when are the times in my life when I wasn't aware that I was selfish? But now in hindsight, I can see that I was very selfish. And so this little ditty popped into my head. I've mentioned before on podcasts that as a kid, our family would take these trips every summer. We'd hook up the travel trailers and we'd head out typically to Colorado, but maybe North Dakota, maybe California, and go have a blast in parts unknown. And one of the years we went out to Colorado, we got to Colorado. My parents needed to set up the trailer. It was probably early evening-ish, and there was a hillside, a mountain right next to us. And my sister and I were like, hey, can we go climb the mountain? And I'm going to guess I was maybe 10 and she was 6, somewhere in there, 9 and 5, I'm not sure. But we ran up the hill, and boy, did we have fun running up that hill and laughing and joking with each other, and it was beautiful, and oh boy, but we spent a little too much time running up the hill and playing on the hillside. And pretty soon it started to get a little dark and the sun was going down, and my mom comes out from the trailer and she's like, you kids get down here now. I'm like, oh God. So we turn around to come back down. Well, going up the hill, was really easy for whatever reason. I guess it's physics. I don't understand that stuff. But coming down, there was a lot of loose, rocky terrain, a lot of gravel and stuff. And so we started sliding, and it was really scary. Like, I don't know how treacherous it really was or in how much danger we really were, but I was nervous that I might fall down and hurt myself. And my sister, who was 4 years younger than me, maybe 6 or 7 at the time, was even more scared than me. So she's like hanging onto trees, and she's like, Chris, please hold my hand so we can go down together. Now, truth be told, it probably wasn't the best idea. We probably did need, our own hands free in case we fell to catch ourselves or whatever. But she was scared, and she was looking for comfort from me. I rationalized in my head that it's not a good idea because we could fall, and if we're holding hands, that's one less hand that each of us have to steady ourselves. But instead of comforting my sister and making her feel better, I told her that would be a really selfish thing for us to do, because if we were holding hands and one of us fell, we might pull the other one down, and it wouldn't be fair for mom and dad to lose 2 kids dying on the side of a mountain, where if we stayed separated, they would likely only lose 1 kid, and so we really should stay separate. And in my head at the time, I thought I was doing a really good thing for my parents and being a good boy. Only with several years hindsight do I realize just how selfish and what a horrible brother I was being at the time. I mean, the very least I could have comforted her a little bit instead of chastising her for trying to kill both of our parents' children. So I just want to end with a couple of things. One, really sorry about that, Jill. That wasn't the best big brother thing to do. And just like back then, as I said earlier, now I'm still a work in progress. So, you may not always be aware of the times that you're being selfish, but just be the best you that you could be. And if somebody wants to hold your hand, it might be nice to go ahead and say, yeah, let's hold hands. So that's it for this edition of I've Got Something to Say. Thanks for listening again. There will be another episode next week. And as always, if you want to reach me, you can give me your comments or questions at cwhiting11@gmail.com. Many big thanks once again to KCTK Radio and my good friend Paul for producing this podcast and making it happen. It's a dream come true for me, and thank you very much. See you next week.
Let's see if we can catch Chris. Chris.
Oh, yes. Yeah, right here.
Yes, a few questions. Great performance. We were all expecting just a regular podcast, but you came out there really swinging, really being vulnerable, really telling us about God and some of those things that everybody needs to know about. Have you ever figured out if God is selfish?
No, I haven't. And I don't think I ever will, but I seriously love that he at 12 or 13, however old he is, was bringing this critical mind to things, because I remember at his age, I just accepted whatever I was told, especially from like authorities, figures in church. Whatever he lands on, whatever belief works for him, good for him. But what a great lesson for all of us to be critical.
Will you let us know if you do figure that out? Now, you had a story about your sister and a chance where you could be a little more helpful, and you weren't. Do you think that she has forgiven you for that particular moment?
I will say that she hasn't mentioned it in several years. So she's either forgiven me or she's repressed it, and then I've made it even worse by telling this story on the air, and it's going to bring back a boatload of bad memories for her.
Well, we sure hope that happens. Yeah, you did mention that you were unaware of some of the times that you were selfish. Would you like your family and friends to tell you those times after they've heard this podcast and remind you of all those times you were selfish?
Oh, dear God, no.
Okay, you heard it, everybody. Thanks a lot, Chris. There he goes, our selfish man.